might notice that my Gemara is open on the title page, not on the first page of the Gemara, because as I was thinking about Masechta Chulin and starting to prepare the shir for the opening of Masechta Chulin, I got stuck on the title. I didn't even get to turn the page for a long time because my question was on the title. What's the problem with title? What is Masechta Chulin doing in Seder Kodshim? How does that work? We say every Motzei Shabbos, Hamavdil ben Kodesh l'Chol. Kodesh and Chol are opposites. Kodesh is sanctity. Chol is the general world in which we live. Kodshim is all about the avodas beis hamikdash. Chulin is about your kitchen, the kitchen in your house. It's about the butcher shop. It's about the way you buy meat and prepare meat. It's about basar v'cholav. It's about all the things that happen in a house on a day-to-day level. What is Masechta Chulin doing in Seder Kodshim? And we see from here that the boundary line between Chulin and Kodshim, between Chol and Kodesh, is much thinner than we think. When we say on Motzei Shabbos, Hamavdil ben Kodesh l'Chol, ben Or l'Choshech, ben Yisrael la'amim, we talk about two different types of Havdalah. So I understand ben Yisrael la'amim, if you look at a Jew and you look at a Gentile, it's not so clear the difference. They both physiologically look similar. And you've got to be Mavdil, you've got to understand what is a Jew and what is a non-Jew. What is the inherent difference? Understanding that becomes such an important part of the way we live and the way we function, of the way we operate. What about Or l'Choshech? Amavdil ben Kodesh l'Chol, ben Or l'Choshech. Does that need a special bracha? Is it so difficult to tell the difference between Or and Choshech? But it depends well. Or and Choshech is not digital. Hashem doesn't turn the lights off and on and off and on. It's an analog process. It's very, very slow and gentle. And there is a moment when Choshech turns to Or. There is a moment when you can start bringing the Korban Tomid. A second before then is too early. A second after then is already okay. There's a moment when you can start davening, when you can say Kriya Shema. That's Hamavdil ben Kodesh l'Chol. Understanding, even when you can hardly see the difference, understanding how radically different Kodesh and Chol is, qualitatively different. It's not about seeing the superficial differences. Hamavdil is about understanding the qualitative difference in the essence of light and dark, in the essence of Jew and Gentile. And in the same way, Kodesh and Chol. We think Kodesh and Chol are opposites, like light and dark is opposite, like Yisrael la'amim is opposite. But they're not. They're so close. The moment of Choshech and the moment of Or, the moment of darkness and the moment of light are separated by a millisecond. The difference between a Yisrael and the Amim, it's a difference that you can't see on the surface. And likewise, the difference between Kodesh and Chol is not such a big difference as we think. And as we'll see in the learning today, that Kodesh and Chol, that which is sanctified and that which is secular, are actually very, very close together in the way we operate. Let's have a look at the psukim on which the Masechta, this part of the Masechta is based in Parshas Ra'eh. Hashem says, Ki yarchiv Hashem Elokecha et gvulecha kashi diber lach v'amarta ochla basar ki ta'aveh nafshecha lechol basar. When Hashem, this is Hashem talking in the Midbar, they're still in the desert, and he says, when you come to Eretz Yisrael, and now you've got a big country to live in, you're not all living around the Mishkan. Some of you are living in the north, some of you are living in the center, some of you are living in the south. It's far from Yerushalayim, and you want to eat meat. What do you have to go to Yerushalayim? At that time, the only way you could eat meat is as part of a korban. Would you have to go to eat meat as a korban? No. If you say, B'chol avat nafshecha tochal basar, you can eat meat whenever you want to. Because the place Hashem has chosen is far from you. And therefore you may slaughter, you may shecht the cattle and the lambs, the sheep that you have, which Hashem gave you, important point, kasher tziviticha, as I've commanded you, important words, v'achalta b'sha'arecha b'chol avat nafshecha, and you can eat in your own cities as much as you want to eat. You don't have to come to Yerushalayim, to the Beis HaMikdash. That's the first time we're permitted to eat meat. After Matan Torah. And even initially permitted to eat meat was only after Noach. In the beginning, Adam Arishon wasn't allowed to eat meat. After Noach gave his life to save animals, the superiority of the human over the animal became entrenched in the Bria, and the right of a human being to consume an animal was created at that time. But then comes the whole understanding of Kodshim, of bringing korbanot, that our eating of meat was only allowed as an outcome of bringing a korban. As part of the avodah, you could eat some of the meat of the korban. But the idea that you could eat meat without a korban was only introduced in Parshas Re'eh. Says the Ramban, "Kasher yachiv Hashem et gvulchem, velo tiyu kulchem yoshvim saviv lemishkan kasher atem hayom bamidbar." You will no longer be sitting around, living around the Mishkan. Yeh lachem basar achulin mutar. Because of the distance to Yerushalayim, you're allowed to eat meat. It's b'di'evet. It's as if it's not the ideal. Hashem is saying, as an outcome, we'll kind of extend the principles of Kodshim to allow you to eat meat. It's not practical for you to have to go to Yerushalayim every time you want to eat meat. And the Ramban says in the next posuk, originally Hashem said, if you want to eat meat, bring a korban shlomim. The only way to eat meat is as a piece of the korban. Give the meat to me, so to say, says Hashem. Bring the meat onto my table, and then you can join as my guest, and you can eat from my table. Mishulchan gavoa kazachu. Then you're eating with me. You're not just eating meat. You're eating as my guest. I consume the meat, so to say, and you eat it as part of my guest. And now that he allows general eat meeting, what are those words? Biyotam korbanot. The way I commanded you to slaughter as a korban, v'tochalotam chulin, you still have to do that. So shchita is still part of Kodshim. It's just that if you do it the way I told you to do it for Kodshim, if you slaughter the animal the way I taught you to do it for a sacrifice, you may now eat it even in under normal circumstances. B'chol tavat nafshecha lomar shiatirem chulin b'chol makom uvilvad shiyu zevuchim kasher tziva mitchila biyotam kulam korbanot. This is provided you shecht in a way that is equivalent to what you've just learned. Which now explains why Chulin comes right after Zvachim and Manochis. We've learnt about how to slaughter meat in Kodshim. Now that you know how to slaughter meat in Kodshim, you may extend that b'di'evet. It's not ideal. You may extend that b'di'evet, and we'll see at the end why that's so important to understand that it's b'di'evet. You may extend that as an extension of Kodshim. Kodshim itself has to be eaten in Yerushalayim as part of a korban. This, says the Ramban, is an extension. You may eat this b'di'evet. Since you can't get to Yerushalayim, you may eat this in your homes around the country, provided you shechted it the way I taught you to shecht Kodshim, says the Ramban. So now I understand why Chulin is part of Seder Kodshim, because it's a natural extension of Kodshim. The question is then, why is it called Chulin? It should be called Shchita, it should be called Kashrus, it could be called Isu Veheta, and the Rambam dedicates a separate sefer for this. The Rambam doesn't put this with Kodshim. The Rambam has a sefer which, interestingly enough, he calls Kedusha. The Rambam has a sefer called Sanctity. And what do you think is in the sefer of Sanctity? You open up the sefer Kedusha. So you go, you wash your hands before you open up the sefer. You meditate a little bit, you get yourself into the right framework. You're about to take out off the shelf the Rambam Sefer Kedusha. And you open it up. The first section of Sefer Kedusha is about sex. The second section of Sefer Kedusha is about food. The third section is about Shchita. That's Kedusha. Yes, in our world, that's Kedusha. That's the whole Chidush. In our world, that's Kedusha. The line between Kodshim and Chullin is very, very narrow. And so, why is it called Masechta Chullin? If the line is so narrow, and the Rambam calls it Kedusha, why did Rabbeinu HaKodesh call it Chullin? So if we compare a Mishnah on Daf Lamed Aleph in Zvachim that we learned, and the first Mishnah of Chullin, we'll begin to understand why it's called Chullin. Because on Zvachim Daf Lamed Aleph we learned Kol Apsulim Sheshachtu Shchitatan Kshera. B'di'evid, anybody who is possible to slaughter Kodshim, if they did so, the Shchita is Kshera. Shashchita Kshera Bezarim, if a non-Kohen slaughtered, it's okay. Uva Nashim, if a woman slaughtered, it's okay. Uva Avodim, and if a slave slaughters, it's okay. Uva Tmeim, and if a Tome slaughters, it's okay. Va'afilu b'kodshei kadoshim, even if it's the most holy of all the korbanot. As long as if it's a Tame, he doesn't touch the meat. That's the Mishnah in Zvachim. Look at our Mishnah. Hakol shochtim v'shchitatan kshera. When it comes to Chulin, anybody can shecht, and the shchita is kshera. By the way, it says anybody can shecht in Siman Aleph in Yoredeya. There's a beautiful long Ramor explaining what a shochet needs to be and what he needs to know and so on. So it says anybody can shecht, but there are a lot of caveats to that. Chutz mi cheresh shoteh v'katan, excepting for a cheresh shoteh v'katan, somebody who's deaf and dumb, somebody who's mentally incompetent, and a child under the age of 13. So we would think the reason that they can't slaughter is because ein bohem da'at, they don't have intention. They can't be deliberate. They don't understand what it's all about. But no, says the Mishnah, Shema yekalkalu shchitatan, we're afraid they might make a mistake in the shchita. However, if any of them shecht, but there's a supervisor, an experienced sheichet watches, and a 10-year-old does the shchita. An experienced sheichet watches, and an imbecile, somebody who's lost their mind, does the shchita. It's kosher. And the expert says, I watched, everything was perfect, everything was fine. What about that? What about the intention? Shchitatan kshera, the shchita is kshera, because you see, we don't need intention by Chulin. And that is the difference between Chulin and Kodshim. Because you see, let's think about Chulin and Kodshim. What is the difference? In the case of Kodshim, we take our physicality, our life force, and our produce, Zvachim and Menachos, and we elevate it to Hashem. We give it to Hashem. So Kodshim is about gifting. It's about giving everything that is ours, giving it to Hashem in recognition that Hashem is the Adon Kol, that the Rebbeinu Shem owns everything. And that's what we do in Kodshim. What do we do in Chulin? We take from Hashem. Hashem gives us the right to eat. Kodshim is gifting. Chulin is receiving. And when you gift, what's important about a gift? You decide you're going to give somebody a gift. You choose the gift carefully. You think about it. You choose it. You package it. You time when you're going to give it to the person. And you give it to the person. And then you're done. You're not there when the person enjoys your gift. That's his part of it. So what adds quality to the gift is all the thoughtfulness you've put into it. The actual utilizing of the gift, you're not part of. What makes it a choshev gift, what makes it a valuable gift, is the thought you put into it. Because in gifting, the thought is the main thing. In receiving, the main thing is gratitude. So when you receive, gratitude is the key. When you give, thoughtfulness is the key. Kodshim is about giving. Chulin is about receiving. Kodshim is about the thought. Chulin is about the gratitude. And when do you show gratitude? Not when you're preparing it, when you're eating it, when you're enjoying it. So all the dinim of Chulin are at the table, where we had in the Menachos Daf Tzadi Zayin that the table is like a mizbeach. When you come to the table, that's when the Kodshim starts. That's when the way you think, the brachas that you make, all the dinim of kashrus that apply, how you eat, when you eat, it's all about the eating. All the halachas about the thought halachas, the mental halachas, are all when you eat. When you're preparing, it doesn't matter what your thoughts are. You're the receiver, you're not the giver. When you're giving, all the thought is in the preparation, in the giving. So Kodshim, where it's all about giving, it's all about thought. It mustn't be pigul, and it mustn't be noisor, and it's got to be l'shem shemayim, it's got to be lishmo, and all the thinking that has to go on as you're preparing the korban, because this is gifting. Chulin you're receiving, and receiving doesn't need thoughtfulness until you actually use it, and at that time you need gratitude. So the difference between Chulin and Kodshim is in the requirement and centrality of machshava, of intention. In Kodshim, the role of intention is very central. In Chulin, there is no role for intention. That's the key differentiator. And if we look at the Lashon of the Mishnah, we see that in Kodshim, in Zvachim, Daf Lamed Aleph, it doesn't mention Cheresh Shoyte V'Kotan, because a Cheresh Shoyte V'Kotan can't shecht in Kodshim. Why not? Why can't they? If an expert is standing there and says they did it fine, why is that not a problem? A woman is allowed to shecht, a slave is allowed to shecht, a tome is allowed to shecht. Yes, because they all have intention, they can all think. A Cheresh Shoyte V'Kotan can't think, and therefore they can't give gifts. They can do the transaction of giving, but they can't do the thoughtfulness of giving. For that you need a competent human being. But in Chulin, where that's not a requirement, it's about receiving, they're a Cheresh Shoyte V'Kotan. If it weren't for the fact that they might make a mistake, technically a Cheresh Shoyte V'Kotan is allowed to do the Shchita. The Shita Mukubetzes, which is interesting, we only got the Shita Mukubetzes on Chulin 23 years ago, when Rabbi Avraham Shoshan, a wonderful researcher, he's a Talmud of Reb Motel Gifter from Telz in Cleveland, and he's done incredible work in discovering and preparing texts of Rishonim that we didn't know about before. And we always knew there was a Shita Mukubetzes on Chulin. The Shita Mukubetzes himself refers to it, the Chidor refers to it in Shem Magdalene, but we never had it. And it was discovered in the Ginsburg collection in the Moscow Museum. And Rav Shoshana prepared it and published it 23 years ago. And today we have the Shita Mukubetzes on Masechta Chulin. And the Shita Mukubetzes asks about the sequence here and says it should have said in the beginning, first the Tana should have taught us the laws of Shchita. You can't do this, you must do that. And then say, who is the kosher lishchot, who may shecht? And his answer made me so excited because it fitted in with the whole thesis. And he says, V'yesh lomar mishum desiyim masechet menachos. We just finished menachos yesterday. What did we finish? We said the important thing with menachos and korbanos is kavona. What is your intention with a gift? What's important is your intention. That you don't need kavona in Chulin. That's why we start with this Mishnah. It's not sequentially correct. And he goes through showing this is not where it should start at all. But just to show that contrast between the end of Menachos and the beginning of Chulin, to understand that boundary line between Kodshim and Chullin, a narrow, thin boundary line, just one of kavana, of intention. The actions are all the same. If you watch it, it's all the same, as the Ramban says. It's the same shchita, just expanded into Chullin. But the difference is in what you're thinking at the time. That's the whole difference. And in fact, on Amud Beis, we'll see the Gemara establishes the Mishnah for particular contextual reasons as a case of Chulin Shinasu al Tarat HaKodesh. It's talking specifically about a person who is bringing Chulin. Yes, he's just shechting to have dinner at home in Haifa, but he wants to do it al Tarat HaKodesh. He wants to emulate Kedusha. Says Rashi, Shirotze lahargil atzmo b'tarat kodshim. He wants to be practiced in how to do it right, even in matters of Tahara. And when you set yourself up to do that, then midrabanan, you've got to do it chayav lihbadel midrabanan mikol tumus absurdus bohem. And that requires, there are rabbanan laws that then require him to do it. So even here, the Gemara on Daf Beis Amud Beis, Rabbi Bar Ulo says that even the Mishnah is already semi-kodshim. It's talking about somebody he's preparing it in his own kitchen, but he's doing it as if he was in the Beis HaMikdash. Because when we eat Chulin, our thoughts should always be on Kodshim. Even when we're eating Chulin, we need to understand this is an expansion from Kodshim. And the Rabbi Yitzchak Lipschitz, my wonderful friend, a big Talmud Chacham, you met him when we had the function for the 50 years of teaching Torah. he was there, and he wrote this magnificent sefer on Chulin called Mibsari Echzeh. And he says, why is it so important to know that it's a b'di'evet? That l'chatchila you shouldn't be eating meat if it's not part of a korban. B'di'evet, you're allowed to eat meat. But when you're eating meat, think of it as korban. And he brings the Maharal, where the Maharal says, remember that at the end of the day, ha'olam umlo'o ha'kolu el HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Everything is the Ribono Shel Olam. And the Adam ein ra'ui sheyeh lo yoter rak mashu ba'aretz. We really shouldn't have any of this. Ki Hashem yitbarach hu shemefanes et hanivraim kulam. When we sit down to eat, particularly meat, we need to understand mishulchan gavoh kozachi, that even there we're eating it at Hashem's table, and that's why the table is like a mizbeach. So we need to understand, even today when we're eating meat, it's an extension of Kodshim. And Kodshim, the difference is Kodshim we're giving. Kodshim is about giving, Chullin is about receiving. But who are we receiving from? We're receiving from the Ribono Shel Olam. Whose table are we sitting at? We're sitting at the table of the Ribono Shel Olam. That's what we need to understand. And if we look at our whole engagement with the physical world through that lens, we'll begin to understand that the gap between Kodshim and Chullin is very, very little. Yesterday's daf was, I know we're a day ahead with the shir, but yesterday's daf we learned the last daf in Kodshim, so to say, in Menachos. And at a certain moment in time, at the time of Shkia, let's say, at the time of sunset, we start the first daf of Chulin. How long is there between Kodshim and Chullin? You would think at the end of Menachos we should write an exam, we should have a graduation, we should have a celebration, make a siyum. No. The next day you start straight away with Chulin. Because the gap between Kodshim and Chullin is so narrow, and as Jews we need to understand that. Hamavdil ben Kodesh l'chol is not because they're so different. Hamavdil ben Kodesh l'chol is because they're so close.